A broken heart finds unexpected shelter. Jessica Harper stared at the engagement ring on her dresser, her hands trembling with rage and heartbreak. 3 days ago, she had walked into her apartment early, expecting to surprise her boyfriend with his favorite dinner. Instead, she found him tangled in their bed with someone from his office. The image was burned into her mind, refusing to fade no matter how many times she closed her eyes. Her best friend Rachel sat beside her on the couch, holding a box of tissues. "You need to get out of this apartment," Rachel said gently. "Come to the charity auction with me tonight. Fresh air, new faces, expensive wine. It'll be good for you." Jessica wanted to refuse, wanted to stay buried under her blankets forever. But something in Rachel's determined expression made her nod. Maybe distraction was exactly what she needed. The auction hall glittered with crystal chandeliers and elegant guests dressed in designer gowns and tailored suits. Jessica felt out of place in her simple black dress, but Rachel squeezed her hand encouragingly as they found their seats. That was when she saw him. Blake Montgomery stood near the bar, his tall frame impossible to miss. He had dark brown hair styled perfectly, sharp green eyes that seemed to see everything, and a presence that commanded attention without effort. He wore a navy suit that fit him like it was made specifically for his broad shoulders and athletic build. "That's Blake Montgomery," Rachel whispered. "The architect who designed half of Boston's skyline. He's brilliant, wealthy, and according to rumors, completely uninterested in relationships." Jessica watched as women approached him throughout the evening, each one met with polite but distant responses. He seemed trapped by his own reputation, surrounded by people yet somehow completely alone. An unconventional proposal. The auction ended, and Jessica excused herself to get some air on the terrace. The cool night breeze felt refreshing against her flushed cheeks. She leaned against the railing, trying to sort through the mess her life had become. Running away from the crowd, a deep voice asked behind her. Jessica turned to find Blake Montgomery standing there, 2 glasses of champagne in his hands. He offered her one with a slight smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just needed a moment," she admitted, accepting the glass. "Thank you. I saw you during the auction," Blake said, leaning against the railing beside her. "You looked like you wanted to be anywhere else. Is it that obvious?" Jessica laughed bitterly. "I'm not really in a socializing mood lately." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Blake studied her face with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable but somehow felt understanding instead. "I have a proposition for you," Blake said suddenly. "I know this will sound strange, but hear me out." Jessica raised an eyebrow, curious despite herself. "I need a wife," Blake continued, his voice steady and businesslike. "Not for love or romance, but for appearances. My company is expanding internationally, and certain cultures prefer working with married men. It would be purely professional, a contract marriage with clear boundaries and an exit strategy." Jessica nearly choked on her champagne. "You're asking me to marry you? We just met." "Exactly," Blake said. "No emotional complications, no expectations beyond the arrangement. You'd have financial security, and I'd have the image I need for business. We could help each other." It was insane. Completely ridiculous. But as Jessica thought about her empty apartment, her shattered trust, and her fear of ever being vulnerable again, the idea held a strange appeal. What if she could have security without risk? Protection without pain? "Why me?" she asked quietly. "Because you're clearly running from something painful," Blake said, his green eyes meeting hers. "And so am I. Maybe we can run together and call it something respectable." The wedding night that changed everything. 3 weeks later, Jessica stood in a private chapel wearing an ivory silk dress that Rachel had helped her choose. The ceremony was small, just a handful of witnesses and a judge. Blake looked handsome in his charcoal gray suit, his expression unreadable as they exchanged simple vows. When the judge pronounced them married, Blake kissed her briefly, his lips warm but restrained. Jessica felt a flutter in her chest that she firmly ignored. This was business, nothing more. The hotel suite Blake had reserved was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Boston skyline, and someone had filled the room with white roses. Soft music played from hidden speakers, and candles flickered on every surface. Jessica changed in the bathroom, her heart racing as she stared at her reflection. She wore a champagne-colored nightgown that Rachel had insisted she pack. Her dark hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders, and her brown eyes looked wider than usual. When she emerged, Blake was standing by the windows, having changed into dark sleep pants and a fitted white shirt. He turned when he heard her, and something flickered across his face. Hunger, surprise, desire, all quickly masked by his usual control. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Thank you," Jessica whispered, suddenly aware of how intimate this situation was despite their agreement. Blake moved closer, each step deliberate and slow. Jessica's breath caught as she noticed the tension in his jaw, the way his hands clenched and released at his sides. "We don't have to do anything," Blake said when he stood in front of her. The agreement was clear. This marriage is in name only. Jessica knew she should agree, should maintain the safe distance they had established. But something about the way Blake looked at her, the heat she saw barely restrained in his green eyes, made her brave. "What if I don't want it to be in name only?" she heard herself say. Blake's eyes darkened. "Jessica, don't say that unless you mean it. Because if you give me permission, I won't be able to hold back. I've been fighting my attraction to you since the moment we met." Her heart pounded. "Then stop fighting." Blake closed the distance between them, his hand cupping her face with surprising gentleness. "Are you sure?" he asked, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "Once we cross this line, everything changes." Instead of answering, Jessica rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. Blake groaned against her mouth, his control finally snapping. He kissed her deeply, passionately, with none of the restraint from their wedding ceremony. His tongue explored her mouth as his hands tangled in her hair, tilting her head for better access. Jessica melted against him, her fingers gripping his shoulders for support. Every nerve in her body came alive under his touch. This was nothing like her previous relationship. This was fire and need and overwhelming sensation. Blake lifted her easily, carrying her toward the massive bed. He laid her down gently, his eyes roaming over her body with unconcealed desire. "You're perfect," he breathed, joining her on the bed. "Absolutely perfect." His hands explored her curves through the thin fabric of her nightgown, learning what made her gasp, what made her arch into his touch. When his lips found the sensitive spot below her ear, Jessica moaned softly. "I need you," she whispered, surprising herself with her boldness. Blake's response was to show her exactly how much he needed her too, the morning after. Jessica woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and Blake's arm wrapped around her waist. She could feel his warm breath against her neck, his body pressed against hers. Last night had been incredible, passionate, and completely unexpected. She had married a stranger for safety, but somewhere between their vows and dawn, everything had shifted. Blake stirred behind her, his arm tightening possessively. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice husky with sleep. Jessica turned in his arms to face him. In the morning light, Blake looked younger, more vulnerable. His dark hair was messy, and his green eyes were soft as they studied her face. "Good morning," she replied, suddenly feeling shy despite their intimacy. Blake leaned forward, kissing her gently. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. Jessica thought about her answer carefully. Last night had shattered every boundary they had established, but she couldn't bring herself to regret a single moment. "No," she said honestly. "No regrets." Relief flooded Blake's expression. "Good. Because I meant what I said last night. You're mine now, Jessica. This marriage might have started as an arrangement, but it's become something real. Before Jessica could respond, Blake's phone buzzed insistently on the nightstand. He groaned, reaching for it. His expression darkened as he read the message. "What's wrong?" Jessica asked, worry creeping into her voice. "There's a business gala tonight," Blake said, his jaw tightening. "The Anderson Foundation event. Apparently, Vanessa will be there." "Vanessa?" Jessica asked, though something in Blake's tone made her stomach clench. Blake sat up, running his hand through his hair. "My ex-girlfriend. We dated for 2 years before I ended things 6 months ago. She didn't take it well. The gala and the confrontation." That evening, Jessica stood in front of the mirror wearing a stunning navy blue gown that hugged her figure perfectly. Blake had insisted on buying it for her, along with matching jewelry that probably cost more than her old apartment's rent. Blake came up behind her, looking devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo. He wrapped his arms around her waist, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "You look stunning," he said, pressing a kiss to her bare shoulder. "Every man there will envy me tonight." Jessica leaned back against him, drawing strength from his presence. She had a bad feeling about this evening, though she couldn't explain why. The gala was held at the Grand Boston Hotel, the ballroom decorated with gold accents and crystal decorations. Businessmen and socialites mingled with champagne glasses, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings. Blake kept his hand on the small of Jessica's back as they moved through the crowd. She felt the curious stares, heard the whispered conversations about Blake Montgomery's surprise marriage. Some looked impressed, others skeptical, but all were intensely curious. Then Jessica saw her. Vanessa Price was beautiful in a dangerous way. She had platinum blonde hair styled in an elegant updo, striking blue eyes, and a figure displayed perfectly in a red dress that left little to the imagination. But it was her expression that made Jessica's blood run cold. Vanessa looked at Blake with possessive hunger mixed with bitter anger. "Blake, darling," Vanessa called out, her voice carrying across the room as she glided toward them. "What a surprise to see you here. And with company." Blake's entire body tensed. "Vanessa. I didn't know you were on the guest list." "Oh, I make it my business to stay informed about your activities," Vanessa said, her smile sharp as broken glass. She turned her attention to Jessica, her eyes scanning her from head to toe with obvious disdain. "So this is the woman you married so suddenly. How charming." "Vanessa," Blake warned, his voice low and dangerous. But Vanessa was just getting started. She turned to the crowd that had gathered around them, drawn by the tension like moths to flame. "I simply must share something with all of you," Vanessa announced, her voice rising. "Since Blake is too proud to admit the truth about why our relationship ended." "Stop," Blake said, but his voice lacked its usual authority. "We were together for 2 years, Vanessa continued, addressing the crowd like an actress on stage. 2 years of me trying to make it work, trying to be patient. But how patient can a woman be when her man can't fulfill his most basic duties?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jessica felt Blake's hand tremble against her back. "That's a lie," Jessica said firmly, but Vanessa spoke over her. "I have medical records," Vanessa said, pulling a folder from her designer purse. "Documents proving that Blake Montgomery has been seeing specialists for years, trying to fix his inadequacy. He can't perform, ladies and gentlemen. That's why I ended our relationship. That's why he married this poor girl so quickly, before she could discover the truth." The ballroom erupted in whispers. Jessica watched in horror as Blake's face went pale, his confident demeanor crumbling under Vanessa's public assault. The aftermath. They left the gala immediately, driving home in crushing silence. Blake gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. His jaw was clenched, and he refused to meet Jessica's eyes. When they reached his penthouse, Blake went straight to the bar and poured himself a drink. Jessica followed, her heart breaking at the defeated slump of his shoulders. "Blake," she said softly. "Don't," he said, his voice hollow. Don't try to make this better. You heard what she said. You heard the rumors. I heard lies, Jessica said firmly. Blake, look at me. He finally turned, and the pain in his green eyes made her chest ache. What if she's right? He asked quietly. What if there is something wrong with me? She was with me for 2 years. She knows things about me that you don't. Jessica moved closer, placing her hands on his chest. I know what we shared last night was real. I know you made me feel things I've never felt before. That's not a lie, Blake. That's truth. Blake pulled away from her touch, turning to stare out the window at the Boston skyline. Maybe last night was a fluke. Maybe I was just trying to prove something. How can you trust me when I don't even trust myself? Because I know you, Jessica insisted. The man I married, the man I made love with, he's real. Vanessa is just bitter and vengeful. Blake laughed bitterly. Is she? Or is she just telling the truth that I've been too ashamed to admit? Maybe I can't give you what you need. Maybe I'll fail you like I apparently failed her. Jessica felt tears burning her eyes. So you're just going to believe her? You're going to let her destroy us without even fighting back? There's nothing to fight, Blake said, his voice flat. She'll make those documents public. Everyone will believe her. And you'll be tied to a man whose reputation is destroyed. I don't care about your reputation, Jessica said desperately. I care about you. Blake finally looked at her, and the distance in his eyes felt like a physical blow. Maybe you shouldn't. Maybe we should end this arrangement before you get hurt worse. I'll make sure you're taken care of financially. You can have the penthouse, whatever you need. I don't want your money, Jessica said, tears streaming down her face now. I want you. I need time, Blake said, grabbing his jacket. I need to think. I'm going to stay at my office tonight. Blake, please don't leave like this, Jessica begged. But he was already walking toward the door. He paused in the doorway, his back to her. I'm sorry, Jessica. I'm sorry I dragged you into my mess. You deserved better than this. Then he was gone, leaving Jessica alone in the vast penthouse, her heart shattering into pieces. She sank onto the couch, sobbing into her hands. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? Just last night, Blake had held her like she was precious, had whispered promises against her skin. Now he was running, letting Vanessa's lies poison everything they had built. But as Jessica's tears dried, something else took their place. Anger. Determination. She refused to let Vanessa Price win. She refused to let lies destroy the connection she shared with Blake. If Blake wouldn't fight for them, then she would fight for both of them. The investigation begins. The next morning, Jessica called Rachel, who arrived within the hour carrying coffee and determination. Tell me everything, Rachel said, sitting beside Jessica on the couch. Jessica explained the entire situation, from the gala disaster to Blake's departure. Rachel listened intently, her expression growing more angry with each detail. This Vanessa woman is lying, Rachel said firmly. And we're going to prove it. How? Jessica asked, feeling hopeless. Rachel pulled out her phone. I know someone. Thomas Grant, a private investigator. He specializes in exposing fraud and manipulation. If Vanessa fabricated those medical records, he'll find proof. Within hours, Jessica was sitting in Thomas Grant's office, a sleek space filled with file cabinets and computer monitors. Thomas was in his mid-40s, with gray threading through his dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. Mrs. Montgomery, Thomas said, reviewing the information Jessica had provided. What you're describing sounds like a pattern of behavior. Let me do some digging into Vanessa Price's background. For the next 2 days, Jessica barely slept. She called Blake repeatedly, but he never answered. She left messages begging him to come home, to talk to her, to not give up on them. But her phone remained silent. On the third day, Thomas called. "Mrs. Montgomery, I need you to come to my office immediately. What I've found is significant." Jessica rushed to his office, her heart pounding. Thomas spread documents across his desk, his expression grim. "Vanessa Price has done this before," Thomas said. "I found 3 other men she dated seriously over the past 8 years. Each relationship ended badly, and each man's reputation was damaged by similar accusations afterward." Jessica's hands shook as she read through the evidence. Email chains showing Vanessa planning her attacks. Text messages to friends bragging about destroying ex-boyfriends who rejected her. Financial records showing payments to a graphic designer for creating fake medical documents. "She's been doing this for years," Jessica whispered, horror and relief washing over her. "It's all lies." "Every word," Thomas confirmed. "The medical records she claims to have are completely fabricated. I verified with the hospital she mentioned. Blake Montgomery has never been treated there for anything except a routine procedure 3 years ago. Vanessa paid someone to create fake documents using stolen hospital letterhead." Jessica grabbed the folder, clutching it to her chest. "I need to show this to Blake. I need him to see the truth." "There's something else," Thomas said carefully. "Blake's sister Diana called me. Apparently, Blake has been at his childhood home for the past 2 days, completely shut down. She's worried about him." Jessica didn't waste another second. She grabbed the evidence and rushed out of the office. Finding Blake. The Montgomery family estate sat on 10 acres outside Boston, a beautiful property with manicured gardens and a grand colonial house. Jessica had never been here before, but Diana had texted her the address and gate code. Diana met her at the front door, her expression a mixture of relief and concern. She looked like a younger, feminine version of Blake, with the same dark hair and green eyes. "Thank God you're here," Diana said, hugging Jessica tightly despite them just meeting. "He's been in his old room for 2 days, barely eating or speaking. I've never seen him like this." "Where is he?" Jessica asked, her heart aching. "Upstairs, 3rd door on the left," Diana said. "Go. He needs you, even if he's too stubborn to admit it." Jessica climbed the stairs, her hands gripping the folder Thomas had given her. She found Blake's childhood bedroom and knocked softly before entering. Blake sat on the edge of his bed, still wearing the same clothes from the gala. He looked exhausted, his hair messy, dark circles under his eyes. When he saw her, pain and longing flashed across his face. "Jessica," he said, his voice rough. "You shouldn't be here." "Yes, I should," she said firmly, closing the door behind her. "Because you're my husband, and I love you." Blake flinched at her words. "Don't say that. You can't love me after everything." "After what? After Vanessa's lies?" Jessica moved closer, sitting beside him on the bed. "Blake, I have something you need to see." She opened the folder, spreading the documents across the bed. Blake's eyes widened as he read through the evidence. Thomas's investigation, the proof of Vanessa's pattern of behavior, the fake medical records, all of it laid out in undeniable detail. "She lied," Blake whispered, his hands shaking as he held one of the documents. "About everything." "Yes," Jessica said, taking his hand. "She lied because you rejected her. She lied because she's vindictive and cruel. But none of it was true, Blake. None of it." Blake's face crumpled, and suddenly he was pulling Jessica into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. His body shook with silent sobs as years of shame and self-doubt finally broke free. "I believed her," he said against her hair. "I let her make me doubt myself, doubt what we had. God, Jessica, I'm so sorry. I pushed you away when I should have trusted you, trusted us." Jessica held him, running her fingers through his hair soothingly. I understand why you doubted. She's been poisoning your mind for months, maybe longer. But I need you to hear me now. What we share is real. The way you make me feel, the connection between us, that's not based on lies or rumors. That's truth. Blake pulled back to look at her, cupping her face in his hands. His green eyes were red-rimmed but filled with emotion. I love you, Jessica. I think I've loved you since that night on the terrace when you looked at me like I was just a man, not a reputation or a rumor. And I was terrified because loving you meant risking everything. I love you too, Jessica said, tears streaming down her face. And I'm not going anywhere. We're going to fight this together. Blake kissed her then, pouring everything he felt into that kiss. All his fear, his relief, his love, his desperate need to make things right. Jessica responded with equal passion, her hands framing his face as she showed him without words how much he meant to her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Blake rested his forehead against hers. What do we do now? He asked. Jessica smiled, picking up one of the documents. Now we expose Vanessa's lies and clear your name. And then we build our life together, the right way this time. Confronting the truth. The press conference was Blake's idea. Rather than letting Vanessa control the narrative, he decided to take control himself. With Thomas Grant's evidence and his lawyer's support, Blake called a meeting with major media outlets. Jessica stood beside him at the podium, wearing a professional navy suit, her hand clasped tightly in his. Cameras flashed as reporters crowded into the conference room. Blake's voice was steady as he addressed the crowd. Good afternoon. I'm here to address false allegations made about me by Vanessa Price. For months, she has been spreading malicious lies designed to damage my reputation and hurt the people I care about. He nodded to his lawyer, who distributed copies of Thomas's investigation to the reporters. As you can see from these documents, Vanessa Price has a pattern of fabricating medical records and spreading false rumors about ex-partners. The documents she claimed to possess regarding my health were completely fabricated. I have statements from medical professionals confirming this. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. Montgomery, why would someone do this? Blake's jaw tightened. Because I ended our relationship after discovering her infidelity. Rather than accepting that, she chose revenge. She's done this to other men before me, destroying reputations and careers because she couldn't handle rejection. Jessica stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. I'm Blake's wife, and I can personally confirm that every accusation Vanessa made was a complete lie. My husband is an honorable, capable man who has been the victim of a malicious smear campaign. Another reporter spoke up. Will you be pressing charges against Ms. Price? Blake's lawyer stepped forward. We are currently pursuing legal action for defamation, fraud, and harassment. We have more than enough evidence to proceed with both civil and criminal charges. The press conference lasted another 30 minutes, with Blake and Jessica answering questions calmly and professionally. By the time they left, the narrative had completely shifted. Vanessa's downfall. The news spread quickly. Within days, other victims of Vanessa's manipulation came forward, sharing their own stories. The business community turned against her, and several companies severed their connections with her family's firm. Vanessa tried to fight back, giving interviews claiming she was the real victim. But the evidence was too strong, and public opinion had turned decisively against her. 2 weeks after the press conference, Vanessa called Blake's office. Jessica was there when he answered on speakerphone. You destroyed me, Vanessa hissed, her voice shaking with rage. You took everything from me. No, Blake said calmly. You destroyed yourself with your lies and manipulation. I'm just making sure you can't hurt anyone else. This isn't over, Vanessa threatened. Yes, it is, Jessica said firmly. You're facing multiple lawsuits and possible criminal charges. It's over, Vanessa. Leave us alone. Vanessa hung up without another word. They never heard from her again. Building forever. 3 months later, Jessica stood in the newly renovated penthouse, looking out at the Boston skyline. Blake had insisted on redecorating, wanting to erase any memories of their difficult beginning and create something truly theirs. Blake came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "How much has changed," Jessica said, leaning back against him. "6 months ago, I thought my life was over. Now I have everything I never knew I wanted." Blake turned her in his arms, his green eyes warm with love. "I feel the same way. You saved me, Jessica. Not just from Vanessa's lies, but from myself. You taught me that I was worthy of love, of trust, of happiness." "We saved each other," Jessica corrected, standing on her toes to kiss him gently. Blake deepened the kiss, his hands sliding down to grip her hips. When they broke apart, both breathing faster, he smiled. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Jessica's eyes widened as he opened it, revealing a stunning diamond ring. "Blake, you already gave me a wedding ring." "That was for a contract marriage," Blake said, taking her hand. "This is for real. This is me asking you to marry me again, properly this time. Not because we need each other, but because we choose each other. Because I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me, Jessica? For real this time, forever?" Tears streamed down Jessica's face as she nodded. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." Blake slipped the ring onto her finger beside her wedding band, then pulled her into a passionate kiss. They had started as strangers making a business arrangement, but they had become so much more. They had become partners, best friends, and true loves. 6 months later. Their second wedding was everything the first wasn't. Held in a beautiful garden with 200 guests, Jessica wore a stunning white gown as she walked down the aisle toward Blake. Rachel stood as her maid of honor, and Diana was Blake's best woman. This time, when Blake said his vows, his voice was strong and sure. "Jessica, you came into my life when I had given up on finding real love. You fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. You saw past the rumors and the doubts to the man I truly am. I promise to spend every day showing you how much I love you, how grateful I am for your strength, your trust, and your beautiful heart. You're my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life." Jessica's vows were equally heartfelt. "Blake, you taught me that taking risks can lead to the greatest rewards. You showed me that real love is worth fighting for. I promise to stand beside you through every challenge, to believe in you even when you doubt yourself, and to love you more with each passing day. You're my home, my heart, and my forever."